What's up, wrestling fans? Welcome to the main event of episode number 297 of the Smark Moment Smack Talk podcast. I'm your host, as always, Tony Mango, and as you can tell by the title in the description and all the other information going on here, the topic at hand is fantasy booking. And if you don't know what fantasy booking is, essentially, it's when you have the creative control to be able to do whatever you would want for a particular card or a particular scenario or whatever we're pitching at the moment. And this particular idea is SummerSlam 2017, because that is coming up very, very soon, August 20th. So we're going to be doing, of course, all of our predictions, breakdowns, and our post-show, and all the, live coverage and stuff when it happens, but that's the card that WWE wanted to do. What's the card that I would want to do? That's essentially what we're talking about here, and the same thing will apply to what you guys have to say, so keep in mind, I want to know what you guys would have booked for the card too. So when you're listening to my pitches and stuff of what I would do, think of your own, drop them in the comments below on YouTube. If you're listening to this on iTunes or Stitcher, go to either the YouTube video, or you can go to the page on smarkoutmoment.com that has all this information actually typed out, and a little bit, some other kinds of detail and stuff. I won't be reading it verbatim. I'm going to be kind of doing this on a whim. So you'll see a little bit different information here and there from this versus the text version and everything. And, drop your comments down below there. But that's what we're going with here. To give you an even more in-depth analysis of what happens when it comes to fantasy booking, you can check out what's on your screen right now, because these are the ground rules. Number one, you can only go as far back as the night after this year's WrestleMania. So you can't book from last SummerSlam. You can't go back 20 years in time and start saying, well, Shawn Michaels never would have turned on Marty Jannetty if I would have had to say. Keep it reasonable when it comes to that kind of stuff. I think the day after WrestleMania is the best kind of bridging gap to where we get similar storylines to what we might have gotten now, versus enough flexibility where you can actually change things up, because we did get the Superstar shakeup, so you can kind of change the way that turned out. Maybe you don't trade certain people, maybe you don't trade anybody at all. Maybe your roster looks exactly the same as what it was on the WrestleMania card or something, or maybe you do drastic trades, or you just turn people heel that were baby faces, and a wide variety of that stuff. That's the time frame that you can go back to. And as I mentioned before about keeping things a little bit realistic and reasonable, all ideas must be somewhat realistic and justifiable within the WWE mindset. So if you're somebody who is a big Kurt Hawkins fan, realistically, he's not getting that much of a push. And you might be able to give him a slight bump up, but the likelihood that he would be, some guy who beat Brock Lesnar 20 times on row every single week on Monday Night Raw, first off, it's not going to happen because Kurt Hawkins is not going to be prioritized like that. Second, Brock Lesnar doesn't work that many dates, so that's not going to happen either. You got to keep it within reason. If somebody is a main eventer, you got to try to keep them in the main event. That's actually something I'm skipping down to number 6 on there. Marquee names cannot be left off the card. So if you don't like John Cena, you don't like Roman Reigns and stuff, WWE would figure out a way to force them on the card. So that is something you got to just deal with, Maybe you don't want to give them a big, big spot. Maybe you don't want to make John Cena the champion going into the event or something like that. But you got to keep in mind that they're not going to take your favorites and just let you do everything you want with them. You got to keep it a little bit, a little bit malleable when it comes to that. But jumping back around to number 3 here, superstars who are retired, deceased, not employed by WWE, and so on and so forth, are ineligible. So you can't take, say, Sting, who is retired and no longer able to compete, and force him to compete. You can't bring Owen Hart back to life. You can't take James Storm and put him back in WWE's graces and stuff like that. It has to be people that are either signed to the company or we know are within the family. That's your flexibility when it comes to that. So you can really, realistically, bring in, say, Diamond Dallas Page if you wanted to. Now, he's not an active member of the roster, but he is part of the WWE family. And you can force Paul Heyman to be in a match, or you can take, say, I don't know, Road Dogg, who is a producer, and you can put him into some kind of a situation like that. But you can't take Cody Rhodes and force him to come back and make him the world champion. It's just not how it works. Number 4, you have to limit the number of call-ups from NXT to the main roster to somewhat within, the reasonable kind of barrier that we're going with for that stuff too, because you can't just take everybody from the NXT roster and move them up to the main roster, because then who would be in NXT? Reasonable, right? And number 5, time constraints need to be accounted for. Realistically, WWE is going to have 2 hours of a pre-show and 4 hours of a main show. So you have 6 hours to work with right here, and a little bit of an overrun. You started at 5 o'clock, pre-show and stuff ends at 7 o'clock, then you get 7 to 8, 8 to 9, 9 to 10, 10 to 11, and that's pretty much your card. And you get, 11:05, 11:15, that's okay to kind of go a little bit over, but we're not talking about starting the event at 9 in the morning on Sunday and ending it Friday afternoon, and it's a week-long kind of thing. Keep that in mind. So no half-hour matches where you have, say, a lineup of 40 matches. It's just not realistically going to work, okay? So let's start things off with a little pre-show information. If you want to see the full breakdown of all my broadcast teams and everything like that, check out the website. You know what? I'll give you a quick breakdown right now, too. Why not? My Raw commentary team would be Michael Cole, Corey Graves, and Booker T. The SmackDown commentary team, Tom Phillips, JBL, and Byron Saxton. So I'm not actually changing anything up there. The announcers would be Mike Rome and JoJo. Backstage interviewers would be Charlie Caruso and Dasha Fuentes. Pre-show host would be Kathy Kelly. I don't think that they're using her as much as she really should be on TV. Our kickoff panel would be Renee Young, Jerry the King Lawler, Peter Rosenberg, and then they would cycle in a couple of different guests depending on whatever the topic was. So if they're talking about, say, the WWE Championship, then maybe they're going to go with somebody who has a prestigious background with the WWE title. Maybe if they have the Universal title, they'll go with Stephanie McMahon, and she talks about how that title means so much to Monday Night Raw. Whatever the case may be, that you can kind of play around with that as you wish. But we have 2 matches on the pre-show, and we also have some backstage segments and stuff like the social media lounge and some video packages and the usual pre-show kind of shenanigans. I would have a segment where Elias Samson, yes, he is Elias Samson to me, not Elias, would be playing the guitar backstage, and he would run into the Fashion Police. And either in the same segment or in a completely different one, preferably in a different one, there would be a meetup between Kurt Angle and American Alpha and Shelton Benjamin. Now, I'm specifying Shelton Benjamin here because he does pop up later on in my card, and I mentioned this before, that people within the WWE family are eligible, but people that aren't in the company necessarily, you got to be a little bit sort of wary on how you're going to do that. Shelton Benjamin was employed, essentially, from the whole SmackDown kind of situation with WWE, and there have been some reports indicating that he is actually kind of employed again, but just hasn't come back yet. So I'm working under the assumption that Shelton Benjamin was given an offer, and it was sort of rescinded, and now that offer is probably a little bit changed, but he's probably back in the mix, and they're probably just sort of like dotting the I's and stuff. In my mind, I would push that further quite a bit, and as soon as Shelton Benjamin would have been able to come back, he would have, and this would have been a whole big story that I'll talk about a little bit later on, but essentially you pop the crowd by getting Shelton Benjamin, American Alpha, and Kurt Angle together. Maybe Charlie Haas if you can swing him. I mean, he's not really all that busy nowadays as far as wrestling for other companies and stuff. So I think that they'd be able to pull that off, but if not, then it's not a necessity. You don't necessarily need them to get the crowd to be all interested in that. But our first pre-show match that you can see on the screen right now is Mike Kanellis versus Ty Dillinger. And the reasoning behind this one is essentially that this would be the introductory feud for Mike Kanellis. He wouldn't have been brought up as early as he was, and they wouldn't have done anything with the whole Sami Zayn thing because that really petered off and nothing's come out of it. I thought a much better idea would have been to utilize Ty Dillinger because he hasn't been getting anywhere near as much attention as he should in my mind. And the storyline behind it could essentially be Ty Dillinger would have been at least utilized better heading up to that point and started to make a little bit of a name for himself in the mid-card on SmackDown. The Kanellis move in. They get a little bit upset about how he calls himself the Perfect 10, and Maria thinks that the only Perfect 10 is Mike. Mike, of course, thinks the only Perfect 10 is Maria, and they're both kind of pissed off that Ty Dillinger considers himself a Perfect 10, and it's a pretty simple feud, but to me, they can kind of play around with a lot of the same things that they did with Sami Zayn, like talk about, you don't really know the power of true love, you're single, how can you be a perfect 10 if you're single, that kind of stuff. And it's not the most important thing in the world, so that's why it goes on the pre-show. And that would be a match where Mike Kanellis would win with a little bit of help from Maria as a distraction because he is the new guy, that's his debut. And debuting on the pre-show is not actually too bad. I don't think that that's something that really would hinder him all that much. Not being on TV, like he's been doing as of late, that is a bigger story. The second match on the pre-show would be Big Cass versus Big Show, and this is pretty much as basic as you can get. Cass is the young guy. He is essentially sort of looking to surpass Big Show as far as that big, tall dude on the roster. There's, of course, other people that are, kind of in the same boat, like a Braun Strowman and Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns and the other kind of big dogs in the fight. But Big Show and Big Cass, the Battle of the Bigs, the Big Man Buffet, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, I'm bringing back that. No, it's not the Big Man Buffet. It's not all the big men all together thrown into the same pile and stuff. But, yeah, this would be basically what we have now, but with less Enzo. For two reasons. Enzo factors in a little bit later on in my card. And I think that really this Big Cass and Enzo thing, it hasn't been doing all that well, and honestly, I don't know if I would have split them up, but this felt like one of the things that I wouldn't have had necessarily any control over, and that Big Cass would have split from Enzo. So if I was going to say he's going to fight anybody at SummerSlam, Big Show would have been my opponent for him. I think Big Show's on his way out, and Big Cass is somebody who he can win that match, and he can look good, and Big Show can kind of put him over a little bit. Or Big Show can win the match and still kind of put Big Cass over a little bit. It sort of depends, and to be honest, I didn't really care too much to figure out like exactly how I would have booked everything leading up to this and everything leading out of it and everything, but basically, you change Big Cass's ring gear. You never give him that horrible entrance music, and you sort of distance him a little bit from Enzo and make it more of just Big Cass and Big Show and less of Enzo sort of being in the middle of the two. And that, to me, is your pre-show. I don't think that you need to overload too much on the pre-show because, as I've said before on previous fantasy bookings, my idea of the pre-show is you take care of all the vignettes, you take care of all the analysis, you take care of the video packages, and if nobody knows what's going on by the time the main show starts, tough shit. You should have watched the pre-show, you should have watched Monday Night Raw, you should have watched 205 Live, and you should have watched SmackDown Live. And you know what? If you are confused at that point, you're probably still going to watch it anyway because you're probably over a friend's house who can fill you in, or it's just simple wrestling, and there's really not all that much that you need to be aware of because you're not going to go, oh man, this is such a complicated storyline. Worst case scenario, you don't know what's happening, and maybe you tune in to the next episode of Raw and SmackDown to try to go, oh, I should really know about this stuff ahead of time before the pay-per-views. You don't give it to them, the video packages of the footage that you've seen every single week on Raw, every single week on SmackDown, and you watch it repeatedly over and over and over again, and then you just see it twice or three times on the same pay-per-view. It takes up way too much time, and you can fit more matches in there, and that's what people want to see. So Big Cast and Big Show ends the pre-show kickoff. And that takes us into the next part, which is the main 4-hour chunk of time for our card. Remember when I said that Enzo Amore would be popping up a little bit later on? Well, hey, look at that. I didn't forget about the little guy. He is actually in 205 Live as far as I'm concerned. He is somebody that I think could be really useful in the Cruiserweight division. He fits the weight limit. He doesn't seem that he's going to be in that good of a position as a mid-carder or trying to find another tag team partner going forward. But him in 205 Live, he's a big fish in a small pond. And most importantly of all, he's somebody who has character, and he's somebody who's popular. 205 Live has good wrestlers. You know, Cedric Alexander is really good, and he's a guy that I think would actually be the one that takes the belt off of Neville. So Neville wins this match against Enzo Amore, by the way. But Cedric Alexander doesn't have much of a personality. And Rich Swann, he has a little bit of charisma here and there, but he's not going to be somebody that people are tuning in specifically to see. Noam Dar's got a little bit. Gentleman Jack Gallagher's got a fun character, you know. But Enzo Amore is a completely different animal. And he is somebody that I think the Cruiserweight division would really, really benefit from having in there. So, you know what? He brings an excitement level to it. He needs something. They need somebody. Put the two together. You got Enzo Amore versus Neville. Neville, of course, is playing the same character that he's been doing because it's been working better for him than anything else in his entire career. And Enzo is the Smack Talker Skywalker. He gets under Neville's fucking nose, and Neville proves him wrong. Neville wins because Neville is the better wrestler between the two, and Enzo Amore can't back up what he says. And that's essentially your storyline. After this, we start getting into Cedric Alexander. He's the one that takes the belt from Neville. Then we kind of move on to a bunch of different feuds and stuff. And I probably would throw some other people into 205 Live too that are just not included in this card, like Oni Lorcan and maybe Kalisto, maybe maybe Ho Loon if he wasn't, released or, any of that kind of stuff. But that's a story for another day. Maybe an article coming up soon. I don't know. Neville beats Enzo Amore in the first match of the night for the Cruiserweight Championship. And that's how we start off our main card. Continuing on from that is our SmackDown Tag Team Championship match where the New Day would go up against American Alpha and Shelton Benjamin. Now, it's pretty obvious why I'm pairing American Alpha and Shelton Benjamin up, right? He had his connection with the whole Team Angle situation, the world's greatest tag team. American Alpha, essentially kind of a piggyback off of that. Not 100% a copycat, but very, very similar. So he would act as a mentor to them, and he would get his hands dirty as well because Shelton Benjamin can still go in the ring. And the New Day, I think, excel really well when they have 3-on-3 feuds, and I'd like to see more of that. But this would be a babyface versus babyface feud. Neither team is heel. That's something that we don't see all too often. We do get it every once in a while, though, and it's something that I think that we can do a little bit more often here and there. Shinsuke Nakamura versus John Cena the other day on SmackDown proved that people will just find a niche. They'll cheer who they want to cheer. They'll boo who they want to boo, and everybody will work out fine in the end. This is a situation where I don't think there would be too many problems that would come out of this. And you can also actually, if you wanted to not have the whole situation with Shelton Benjamin wrestling, it could be the other member of the New Day isn't doing that. It's up for speculation when it comes to that. Whatever your preference is, I would personally go with the 3-on-3. The most important thing out of this is not that we have babyface versus babyface. It's that it opens up this world for other 3-on-3 feuds on SmackDown that I would like to see. I would really, really hope, in an ideal world at the very least, that we could get Carlito to return to WWE, and the New Day, American Alpha with Shelton Benjamin, the Colognes with Carlito, Jinder Mahal, and the Singh brothers. Those 4 tag teams would be in a fatal 4-way of trios at WrestleMania 34. So giving you a little bit of an indication of how this would go. We would kind of have a little bit of crossover between some of these different tag teams, and then it would be, all of them kind of merging together and stuff. Maybe if you want to go even crazier, you add a third person into the Fashion Police, and you add like another tag team of 3s or something, or, whatever the case may be. But at the very least, I think that Jinder Mahal and the Singh brothers, the American Alpha, Benjamin trio, and the Colognes could work really well with the New Day. And that's something where I would keep that in mind, and this would kind of be the start of a lot of those 3-on-3 Freebird kind of fatal, well, it's not fatal 4-way because it's only 2 tag teams, but you know what I mean. Stumbling around here when it comes to that. But that is my idea as far as the SmackDown tag team titles go. I think that it's a better option than just the New Day versus the Usos for the 3rd time in a row. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you agree. I don't know. Leave those comments below. Tell me what you think. So here's where things get pretty interesting. You can see on the screen right now, The Miz would be defending the Intercontinental Championship against Finn Balor. But behind them, we've got the Miztourage, of course, supporting The Miz. Maurice and Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel. But Finn Balor has not come alone. He is reteaming with Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson, the Good Brothers, and they've reformed the Balor Club. The reasoning behind this to me is kind of multiple tiers. Number one, I do like the idea of the Miztourage. I don't know if I necessarily would have gone with Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel over Curtis Axel and Kurt Hawkins, but it makes sense because they were both in the movie, and, all right, I'll buy it. And The Miz having the Miztourage does make a lot of sense to me. Finn Balor and The Miz is a feud that I think could be pretty damn good. And Finn Balor is the type of guy that I don't think he's ready to be that Universal Champion. He is somebody who could fight for it, but I think that there's bigger fish to fry, and there's better feuds that you can kind of do in the meantime and stuff. But The Miz is a spectacular Intercontinental Champion, and the only person that I could see that really I would prefer to see have a little bit of a run with that belt is Finn Balor. I think that he had his Universal title run, which really doesn't even count, and his NXT run is a good run, but he needs a mid-card title. And the Balor Club comes into effect here because I think Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows are a little bit funnier than what they were before, and they've figured out that the edge is when they're calling people nerds and stuff like that, and they can get the crowd to kind of get along with them as opposed to try to hate them. So I would have just said, you know what? Act like dicks, but be baby faces. Baby faces who are assholes do get over with the crowd. Dean Ambrose did, Stone Cold Steve Austin did, The Rock did, Chris Jericho did, Shawn Michaels did. A lot of different people in the past. Triple H, when he's been a babyface, has been an asshole. The only difference between him as a babyface and him as a heel is, as a babyface, he'll help out people, he'll come to the rescue, and when he's a heel, he'll, fuck corpses. And, he is still making fun of people, though. He's making fun of babyfaces and heels when he's a babyface, so on and so forth. So you can play around with that kind of stuff as you will. But the feud is mostly about The Miz calling Finn Balor boring, because I love that The Miz can go out there and kind of say the things that maybe are going on behind the scenes or what people are thinking and turn that into what a feud is. When The Miz called out Dean Ambrose for being lazy, that made more sense to me than if he would have just said, "You're a great champion, but I'm going to beat you." I cared more that he was saying, "You're a lazy fuck," and whatever. Now, that may not be true, of course, but that was a perception that was kind of going around on the internet, and when that happens, you kind of turn into the skid. Finn Balor, to me, is boring. He can't cut a promo. It's kind of frustrating to hear him sort of go along with a storyline, and you know that his promo is not going to really be able to hold up his end of the bargain. So Balor in this situation is somebody who can't really bark, but he's got the bite. The Miz, on the other hand, is all talk and no bite, and that's their dichotomy. Finn Balor can't get anywhere because the Miztourage are continually fucking him up. Finn Balor has his friendship with Anderson and Gallows, and they come to his rescue. And even though we don't have the Miztourage and the Good Brothers fighting in this match, they are in their respective corners, and Finn Balor comes out on top, wins the Intercontinental Championship. We carry this over into the next pay-per-view where they can do the rematch, and maybe even have a 6-man tag, or, we can do that on Monday Night Raw. We can switch things up and have it where it's like Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows fight Bo Dallas and Curtis Axel. Then the next night it's Finn Balor and The Miz go against each other again, or Finn Balor fights Bo Dallas and The Miz fights Carl Anderson. They like to do that kind of stuff. So keep that in mind. Essentially, we get the Balor Club, and that's cool. And Finn Balor gets a run with the Intercontinental Championship. We get to see what he can do on the main roster as a featured person in the mid-card who doesn't have the most amount of pressure in the world. And The Miz, most importantly, can move up to the main event. Because I think that The Miz is a main eventer, and they just don't necessarily give him the credit. Maybe he doesn't win the Universal Championship. Maybe not. But it would be at least an option, and I'd like to see that. At this point in the night, we should be at least heading into hour 2, if not, 10 minutes into it or 20 minutes into it or whatever the case may be, but not too far into it. And the Raw Tag Team Championship would be on the line. The Revival going in as champions against the Hardy Boyz. My scenario here would have been as follows. The Hardy Boyz defeated Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson for the championship at WrestleMania. Very quickly afterward, they were brushed aside and put into this feud with Cesaro and Sheamus. And that didn't make any sense to me. It seemed rushed, and it seemed like the wrong decision. And then we had Cesaro and Sheamus feuding with the Hardy Boyz for quite a while, and I wouldn't have done that. Instead, Cesaro and Sheamus would have remained babyfaces for at least a little bit, and they would have feuded with the Revival when the Revival first came up after WrestleMania. In the meantime, the Hardy Boyz would have feuded with Gallows and Anderson, and by the end of that feud, Gallows and Anderson would do that whole turn with the Balor Club, and we'd get them as babyfaces. Meanwhile, Cesaro and Sheamus would kind of be working their way towards turning heel a little bit, and we could get them as heels a little bit further down the line and stuff, but they're not really the most important people in the roster right now, so I kind of would let them sort of take this event off. I don't think that they're really the most necessary people, and the bigger story to me would be that the Revival take the titles away from the Hardy Boyz on the pay-per-view before SummerSlam, which would be, if I remember correctly on my list, it was the Great American Bash and not Great Balls of Fire, because that pay-per-view name sucks. So the Revival have a request for this match. They do grant the Hardy Boyz a rematch, but they've got the upper hand, and they end up picking some kind of style, which I'm not too sure what we would do, where they basically undo what the Hardy Boyz do, which is the crazy stunts and stuff. The Hardy Boyz are known for ladder matches and for being able to do things like that, while the Revival are completely different. They are not going to be wanting to do any matches like that. They're ground technician type of guys. So they position the Hardy Boyz in a scenario where it's kind of a no-win situation, and people are pissed because the Revival retain the titles here. Eventually, down the line, the Revival would drop the belts to Gallows and Anderson. They would win them back as babyfaces, because I think that the Revival versus the Good Brothers could be a really, really good feud. Whether this is at WrestleMania or it's at Survivor Series, probably Survivor Series. I don't really know what I would do with the Raw Tag Team titles when it comes to WrestleMania, but hey, I'm not fantasy booking WrestleMania yet, so we'll get down to that when we get down to it. But Revival versus Hardy Boyz is what I would go with. We're not going to get that this year because we've got an injury to Scott Dawson, but, you change around a whole lot of different plans. Scott Dawson probably wouldn't have gotten injured necessarily, so I'm going to work under the assumption that I would have been able to kind of book around that. We can give ourselves a little pat on the back when it comes to those things and add a little magic pixie dust to our cards. So that's the Raw Tag Team Championship match, kicking off the second hour, I should say. Stop me if you heard this before. In 2017, John Cena wrestles in a flag match, but not against Rusev. No, he goes up against Jinder Mahal, and it's for the United States Championship that Jinder Mahal has. I need to preface this a little bit with a bunch of different stuff here. My scenario going from WrestleMania up until this SummerSlam card, Kevin Owens beats Chris Jericho to win back the United States Championship. That whole scenario, that was weird to me. Instead, Chris Jericho loses the belt to Jinder Mahal. Jericho has always kind of been okay with putting over some guys that are a little bit lower on the card than he is, so I don't think he would really mind that. And Owens was just trading this back and forth with Jericho and AJ Styles, and it's really kind of become a mess. I think that the new Face of America gimmick doesn't make any sense to really go with Kevin Owens, but it could be merged in with Jinder Mahal's character, and I don't think that Jinder Mahal is ready for the WWE title. I know he's held it for a couple of months now, which is insane, but I think the better scenario with his gimmick and the merging of the new Face of America thing is to have him hold the United States Championship. So this essentially replaces his WWE title win with the United States title. It replaces the Kevin Owens new Face of America with the modern day Maharaja and the new Face of America, that kind of thing. You merge those storylines into one. There's less overlap, less stuff to worry about, and it gives us the obvious story of John Cena fighting for American pride, and the flag match is a scenario where he can lose, and it could be because of the Singh brothers. And John Cena essentially puts over Jinder Mahal, and we get a big heel because, the American guy, John Cena, lost a flag match? He can't do that. Jinder Mahal is a jerk. Boo. Eventually, down the line, Jinder Mahal would drop that title to AJ Styles, who would defend it against Shinsuke Nakamura at WrestleMania 34. So I think that is a much better scenario than the random John Cena versus Rusev flag match, the John Cena Baron Corbin thing that we're getting now, the Jinder Mahal Shinsuke Nakamura thing. Lots of different things get untangled in this web, and it makes a lot more sense to me. And it works better, I think, for Jinder Mahal, because if he has a good enough win and a title run with the United States Championship, then he can work his way up until the main event. But I don't like the idea of the sink or swim, of just, let's put the big title on that guy, and if he sucks at it, oh well. Because to me, the title should mean more than that. It shouldn't be a prop to make somebody seem better. Somebody should achieve that status of being worthy enough to carry that title. And I know that a lot of people disagree with me on that. That's fine. That's what your booking scenario is. Then book your card the way that you're going to book it, But Jinder Mahal beats John Cena in a flag match, retains the United States Championship. Boo, boo, boo. By now, we're 8 matches in. You're thinking to yourself, where are the women on this card? Well, I didn't forget about them. We have the SmackDown Women's Championship match, Naomi defending against Tamina. This feud would also include the Usos. There is a familial connection that they would play into here because Jimmy Uso is married to Naomi, and of course Tamina is part of the whole Samoan lineage, so it's kind of like blood versus marriage, and who do they support, and different things like that. Not really too much to say about this one, unfortunately. I hate to say that about the first women's match and make this the shortest thing that I've got going on, but that's really what it is. It's kind of a bathroom break. I know there's not going to be a lot of people that really, really love to see this match over some of the other matches on the card, and there's something much more important coming up right after this, but I do think that Naomi and Tamina could put on a much better match than Naomi and Natalya, and that's not a shot at Natalya. Natalya is one of their best women's wrestlers, but her character is crap, and Tamina doesn't really need that much of a character, because all she is a physical, imposing threat. Naomi and Tamina have had some decent matches before, and I think that if they got the opportunity to kind of play around and figure stuff out for each other, and the support from WWE of saying, look, you two can go out there, you can tell a story, do what you want, we're going to give you, your 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, I think that they could do a damn good job. And that could be one of those sleeper matches where people might go get their popcorn and stuff, and afterward they look back and they go, crap, I missed that. I shouldn't have done that. I should have gone in the middle of, some backstage interview segment that popped up for a minute or so. Or, I think that it deserves more credit than what it probably is going to come off as seeming. I would actually be interested in seeing this feud. I'm not all that interested in Naomi versus Natalya. And for the record, no cash-in from Carmella here. Naomi does not lose the belt. She retains against Tamina, and we can talk about a cash-in a little bit later on. Maybe, I don't know, Hell in a Cell or so. Hey, what is this on your screen right now? That's right, it's the Money in the Bank ladder match. This is the thing that's going to kick off our third hour. It's one of the most important matches of the night. And yes, this means there is no Money in the Bank pay-per-view. Instead, it gets replaced with Breaking Point. I've talked about this before. I think that that title is great. I think that they need to bring that back. And I hate the idea that Money in the Bank can be a brand-specific pay-per-view. So if they weren't going to make that a co-branded fifth Big Five kind of thing, then it needs to go away. And I actually would prefer it more if it was just a match on a card like this, because the WrestleMania card ends up needing the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. This needs something that you can cram a lot of people into. Remember, I still don't have some people on this card like Sheamus and Cesaro. They aren't factored in because I don't have enough room for them. And I'm adding people into matches as like backstage support and in the corner of this person and whatever like that, and multi-man matches and whatever, trying not to make it to where every match is a fatal four-way and stuff. But this is a good way to get around a little bit of that. As I mentioned before, Great Balls of Fire would have been a bit replaced with the Great American Bash, so you switch those up a little bit. Essentially, you take the Money in the Bank ladder match and you put it on Survivor Series from here going forward, as long as the brand split is a brand split. And leading up to this, there would be qualifying matches on Raw and SmackDown where you would see a bunch of people competing for the right to be able to get into this match. The key being each brand has 5 representatives for, Raw and SmackDown. The people that you don't see on this card are the ones that lost their qualifying matches. So Luke Harper, for instance, Eric Rowan, Apollo Crews, Mojo Rawley, Rusev. Rusev is not on my card. He is an important part of this, though. As you can see here, the list of the people that are involved are Baron Corbin, Braun Strowman, Bray Wyatt, Dean Ambrose, Dolph Ziggler, Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Samoa Joe, Seth Rollins, and Shinsuke Nakamura. The reasoning behind these people, alright, Baron Corbin is somebody that I think has a lot of upsides, but he doesn't progress well enough, quick enough, that he's at a spot where I would probably give him that Money in the Bank. Braun Strowman is one of the best things that they've got going on right now, and he needs to be protected. So he needs to be in a match where he either wins or he looks dominating and somehow he loses without taking a pinfall loss or a submission loss. Bray Wyatt, he's sticking around. I think he's kind of blah, but he is a big name, and you got to work him in there somewhere. Dean Ambrose is a great person in these type of matches. Dolph Ziggler is another one. Another guy that has been a world champion, and he can always bulk out these kind of matches. Kevin Owens, we'll get to him in a little bit. Sami Zayn, we'll get to him in a little bit. Samoa Joe is in a similar position to Braun Strowman, where he needs to get a big featured match on the card where he can look like he can be the number one contender after that kind of a situation, where you'd think that he might end up winning this, but he doesn't. Seth Rollins, similar boat to Dean Ambrose. Shinsuke Nakamura, I don't understand why they're going with him against Jinder Mahal for the WWE Championship, but I think that he is another person who is noteworthy enough that he needs to be on a high-profile match, and he would have beaten, I don't know, take your pick, Sheamus, for fucking who cares. They're on separate brands, but you know what I mean. It doesn't matter who he beats to get into there. It doesn't matter who anybody specifically beats, but Sami Zayn. I would have had Sami Zayn take Rusev out of the running of this match, and Zayn would be just about ready to win, and Rusev would interfere and cost him the match. This would turn into a feud for SmackDown with Sami Zayn and Rusev going forward. And who is it that scoops up the victory when Sami Zayn is unable to do it? Kevin Owens. Those two have this feud that's just going to keep going. And Kevin Owens has to keep getting the upper hand, because if Sami Zayn just keeps beating him, then what's the feud anymore? but Kevin Owens would gloat, and he would be talking about how he's Mr. Money in the Bank, and he did it all on his own. But we all know that Rusev is the main reason why Sami Zayn didn't win it. Because what's fun to watch when heels win better than a babyface who was just about to win and the heel ended up squeaking by with the win instead? Owens, I think, is the best guy for that Money in the Bank, and that would come into play when it comes to WrestleMania, because Kevin Owens would be either going in as the world champion, or he would be cashing in to get his title shot at WrestleMania. I haven't quite decided yet, leaning more towards the idea that he would cash in around maybe the Royal Rumble, and it would end up being him against Randy Orton at the not the Royal Rumble, at WrestleMania. I think that could be a really good quality feud. Randy Orton would not win the Royal Rumble if that was the case, but this is another whole thing for let's see what I do when I start fantasy booking WrestleMania 34 in a couple of months. Point being, you get a lot of people on this card. You get a lot of them in one match, which is one of the big headlining matches. Braun Strowman and Samoa Joe in them can lose, but they don't really lose. Somebody like Shinsuke Nakamura can lose, but he doesn't really lose. And it ends up boiling down to Kevin Owens is your Mr. Money in the Bank. Now, you may be wondering what happens with the women's Money in the Bank. Unfortunately, we don't have it. Now, that's not a detriment to the women's Money in the Bank ladder match not being something that I want or something like that. I actually do really like the idea of that. But the main reason why I didn't include that on this is I think you need one event here with SummerSlam where you don't have two Money in the Bank ladder matches. And in the future, maybe instead of doing a Raw women's title match and a SmackDown women's title match, you do a women's Money in the Bank ladder match, as well as the men's. It's something to ponder about, something that I think could be pretty interesting going forward, and we'll sort that out when it comes down to it. But we do have a Raw Women's Championship match on the card here, Bayley versus Alexa Bliss, and we were going to be getting this actually for SummerSlam, oddly enough. I actually wrote this card up for my fantasy booking weeks and weeks ago. And when they decided that they were going to go with this, I was like, oh shit, maybe they're going to kind of replicate a little bit of what I would have done. But they wouldn't have to a certain extent, because I would have changed up the way that they would have come to this far earlier. Bayley and Alexa Bliss never would have had the matches that they had as early as they did. That's one big change. Instead, Bayley would have had a feud with Emma, and Alexa would have had an actual feud with Mickie James, because we never really got to see that. Bayley and Bliss would eventually have a match here. This would be the first match that they would be having. Bayley would be going in as the champion. She would be still retaining that from WrestleMania and stuff onward. And Sasha Banks would be in Bayley's corner to help offset Nia Jax being in Alexa Bliss's. Alexa Bliss would win the title here, and she would hold it for at least a couple of months. Eventually, she would drop it to Sasha Banks. And then Sasha Banks would turn heel, get all cocky about how she's the champion, and we would get our Sasha Banks versus Bayley match at WrestleMania. Alexa Bliss, Nia Jax, and company would probably be Lumberjills, if they go by that name still. Maybe Lumberjacks if they just want to go with it. As a means to kind of get them onto the card and to, not skip out on Alexa Bliss, but I think that a money match is Sasha Banks as a heel against Bayley at WrestleMania, and this is, I think, the best course of action that you would have been able to do with that, because somebody needs to beat Bayley, and Alexa Bliss was the right choice. They just didn't quite go about it as well as they should have. I think that they really could have had a great feud, and it really could have been something built just around the idea of Alexa Bliss being a bitch and Bayley being kind of a toddler. But they went into this weird "this is your life" thing, and that just killed it. And they did this kendo stick match, which I was really confused about why they decided to go with that. I would have changed those things up. So don't think about this as Alexa Bliss versus Bayley again, because it would have been the first time that they would have happened. And this would have been like the real catalyst for their feud. And it would have been mostly about Alexa Bliss being a mean girl. She's got Nia Jax backing her up as her muscle. Bayley has Sasha Banks kind of as her muscle
because Sasha Banks isn't, as imposing as Nia Jax is, but she's the boss. She's got the attitude. Bayley's the kind of the pushover. And that's how you would sort of balance things out like that. I think that this would have been a much better option, and it would have been a good send-off for Bayley as champion, and a good start for Alexa Bliss. She could have held the title until Survivor Series. She could have held it until the Royal Rumble, actually. That would have been kind of interesting. I don't know. Pick and choose when Sasha wins that title and when she turns heel, and eventually we'll sort that all out. We're heading into the final hour here. Only 2 matches in that time frame because we want to give them about a half an hour apiece because they are the 2 most important matches of the night, as they are the 2 world title matches. First up is the WWE Championship match. Randy Orton going in as the champion against the challenger AJ Styles. I think that the whole situation with Bray Wyatt winning the belt just so Randy Orton could win the belt from him at WrestleMania and do the whole Royal Rumble win and then lose it to Jinder Mahal totally ruined the whole point of this thing. At this point, Randy Orton shouldn't have won the Royal Rumble. Bray Wyatt shouldn't have won the WWE Championship. And, all the stuff that I was talking about before with AJ Styles versus The Undertaker. And, they could have gone a much, much better way. Instead, I can't get really around that. I think that, if we're starting right after WrestleMania, Randy Orton just won the title from Bray Wyatt. What do you do with him? You keep it on him longer. He needs to really earn that all that stuff was worth it. Because John Cena beating AJ Styles for that 16th world title and dropping it like 2 weeks later is stupid. And then Bray Wyatt dropping that belt, 4 weeks later or whatever it was, that pissed me off too, because it's just playing hot potato to put it on Randy Orton and stuff. And if you're going to go through all those hoops, Randy Orton needs to earn the fact that he had all that fuss made about him at the start of the year. So, in this scenario, he's not quite a babyface. He's not quite a heel. He is still a babyface more than anything, but he's more of a tweener in the feud. AJ Styles is a babyface. You have him turn with that whole Shane McMahon story. I don't think that the Shane McMahon angle was the best thing that they should have done at WrestleMania either, but I can't get around that. So AJ Styles just becomes number 1 contender, and they have a good fucking wrestling match. There's really no story. AJ Styles is the challenger. Randy Orton is the champion. Orton's a little cocky. AJ Styles knows that. He's kind of cocky. He's the phenomenal one, but Randy Orton kind of has his number. And you just do babyface versus babyface. Kind of the same as what the New Day and the American Alpha thing is. It's okay for babyfaces to go up against each other. And you know what? If some of the crowd cheers for Randy Orton and some of the crowd cheers for AJ Styles, well then you know what, WWE? That is when you have to eat your words. Because you always say, with Roman Reigns and John Cena, it doesn't matter what type of reaction as long as you're getting a reaction. Can't bitch and complain at that point, right? So, AJ Styles comes up short. Randy Orton just happens to hit an RKO out of nowhere. He wins. AJ Styles has to deal with it. But there's this looming threat of Kevin Owens. He is Mr. Money in the Bank at SummerSlam. He doesn't quite cash in right early, though. You can't do it like that. Kevin Owens would need to cash in later on in the year, around, say, maybe the beginning of November. Let's put it at that point. Maybe the end of October, something like that. Kevin Owens cashes in on Randy Orton. He injures him in the process. Randy Orton likes to take a little bit of time off here and there. You give him, Christmas off with his family and stuff. He's rehabbing an injuries that he's got over the years, so on and so forth like that. Randy Orton comes back with the Royal Rumble, comes up a little bit short, and he is desperate to get back his WWE Championship that Kevin Owens stole from him. So how does he earn that title shot? Randy Orton has to win the Elimination Chamber, and that's what Randy Orton does. He gets that title shot. It's him versus Kevin Owens at WrestleMania. The person from Monday Night Raw is the one who is going to be challenging with the whole Royal Rumble. And we're going to get to that in a little bit because it's a little bit of a finagling. And then what happens at WrestleMania? Kevin Owens retains. Randy Orton comes up short. Sometimes you don't get what you want, kids. But Kevin Owens, of course, at that point, is going to have to start dealing with people like AJ Styles. He's going to have to deal with Shinsuke Nakamura. He's going to have to deal with Sami Zayn. There's a lot of other people that are gunning for Kevin Owens post-WrestleMania. And what happens post-WrestleMania? Superstar shakeup. So you can always switch it up. You can always have plenty of options for Kevin Owens. But Kevin Owens, I think, deserves to go into WrestleMania as the WWE Champion and leave as the WWE Champion. I think he should have done that with the Universal title and Chris Jericho. But hey, we're getting back to that argument again, aren't we? And finally, the main event of the night, the Universal Championship match. Brock Lesnar goes in as Universal Champion against Roman Reigns. No Samoa Joe, no Braun Strowman. The reasoning why is Brock Lesnar has to fight Samoa Joe and Braun Strowman later in the year. His match against Samoa Joe would happen at Survivor Series, and his match against Braun Strowman would happen at WrestleMania. Braun Strowman beats Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania. Brock Lesnar probably beats Samoa Joe at Survivor Series, but it's a good fight, and it's kind of close and stuff like that. Neither of those matches is for the Universal Championship because Roman Reigns wins the Universal title at SummerSlam. I have said this repeatedly over and over and over again. I do not want to see Roman Reigns going into WrestleMania to challenge Brock Lesnar for the title or in any capacity. I think it's a bad booking decision, and I can't see it being anything but something that blows up in WWE's face. So you get rid of that option. Roman Reigns wins the Universal title here. He continues to defend the Universal Championship all throughout the rest of the year, all throughout the beginning of 2018, against people like Samoa Joe, Braun Strowman, Finn Balor, The Miz, maybe Dean Ambrose, maybe Seth Rollins, whoever it may be, maybe Bray Wyatt for an offshoot, maybe not, because I don't really want to see that again. Maybe you have another superstar shakeup. And whatever the case may be, Roman Reigns is playing a tweener role. He can fight baby faces. He can fight heels. He's going to go out there and he's just going to be paired up with random ass people. But you got to make him really cocky. And you got to make him to a point where he's essentially a heel. Who wins the Royal Rumble? John Cena. SmackDown's John Cena. And he challenges for the Universal Championship. Because there used to be a clause in that Royal Rumble win that you could challenge for whichever of the two titles you wanted to. Didn't matter that you were on a particular brand. John Cena wins the Royal Rumble, challenges Roman Reigns for the Universal Championship at the main event of WrestleMania 34, where John Cena wins title number 17. Actually gets a babyface reaction for the first time in a long while. Roman Reigns is a bitter as fuck heel coming out of that. He doesn't get that sort of, oh, I beat The Undertaker, and I beat Triple H, and I put down this guy, and that guy, and that guy, and John Cena's just the next one. Because that's too predictable. Everybody would be sitting there going, oh my God, Roman Reigns is just going to be John Cena, and this is going to be him passing the torch. Nope. John Cena's historic 17th title win over Roman Reigns gets him a little bit of goodwill to certain fans. Gets John Cena that real big moment where you put him up against the one guy that he probably would get cheered over. And it's the most historic thing that you can do at this point. That is crucial for how SummerSlam works for me. Roman Reigns has to beat Brock Lesnar. He has to beat him for the Universal Championship. And then we kind of do the rest of the year the way that I just said. And, at the end of WrestleMania 34, we're looking at essentially maybe Bayley as the Raw Women's Champion. Maybe Becky, maybe Charlotte on SmackDown. But probably Asuka is the Women's Champion on SmackDown. Our WWE Champion is Kevin Owens. Our Universal Champion is John Cena, because he hasn't won that Universal Championship yet, and that's something that he needs to do. Roman Reigns, of course, bitter as fuck. He doesn't like that whole idea. Brock Lesnar, he's either gone in UFC or he's sticking around, but he's put over Braun Strowman as that next big guy. Big Cass, in the meantime, has been getting a big push. We've got maybe Big Show has his retirement against like Samoa Joe at WrestleMania. We've got important people like Baron Corbin in the mid card of the United States title scene, where it's like AJ Styles and Shinsuke Nakamura and Baron Corbin and Dolph Ziggler and Mojo Rawley and Ty Dillinger and Mike Kanellis and Sami Zayn. And I think that that's a good way to kind of round things out. The tag titles are in good hands because we got baby faces for the Balor Club, and we got the Hardy Boys, and we've got the New Day, and we've got the American Alpha. Obviously, that's not anything with Kurt Angle. Kind of like the storyline, but we'll see where that goes. No idea who the Cruiserweight champion is at the time as WrestleMania ends, but hey, you know what? We're talking about SummerSlam, so let's not get too ahead of ourselves, right? Essentially, at the end of SummerSlam, though, we'd start building towards that kind of scenario. And that's it, guys. That is my card for SummerSlam 2017 if I had creative control and if I could do my fantasy booking. So let me know what you think about this. Do you like it better, or do you think that it's worse than what we're getting actually for SummerSlam this next coming week? And what would your card be if you had the same ultra powerful kind of manipulation skills where you could just do whatever you want? Drop them in the comments below. And hit that subscribe button if you haven't done it already. Give this video a thumbs up. Pass this all along on Facebook and Twitter. Of course, follow us there at SmarkOutMoment. Share this on whatever you want to share it on. Reddit, on message boards, and, yell at your friend, your next door neighbor. Just go like, hey, Phil, fucking check this out. We all know a Phil, right? Good guy, Phil. And, anything that you guys do like that is going to be greatly appreciated, everybody. But that's it for this week as far as Smark Out Moment Smack Talk content goes. And the next week is going to be kind of chock full of different things. Of course, we're going to do our hot tags, and we're going to do our Ask Him and the Rust Hold and stuff like that. But we're also going to have to do our NXT TakeOver predictions, our SummerSlam predictions, our NXT TakeOver post-show, our SummerSlam post-show. Then the week after that is going to be the mailbag. We got a lot of stuff on my plate. And we also have, I think, something with the Mae Young Classic happening. And lots of stuff. So stay tuned to the channel for more. All that stuff is coming your way when it is coming your way. And for now, adios, everybody. This has been another Smark Out Moment, and I'm being counted out.